So we're going to continue looking at some of these cartoons from the period. And here we see the original Cubist. And this is basically, again, getting at that idea that anyone, even your grandmother who creates quilts, can be a great Cubist. And obviously this is making a mockery of actual Cubism, of the show. This is someone who probably heard the term, kind of saw some other cartoons reacting, and he's reacting to the reactions because we're moving further and further from anything that reflects reality. And then we have this piece. This was from Puck, and this is sort of life with the Cubists and Futurists. So this is showing people's confusion as they look at the work. The fact that visitors will get angry, viscerally angry at these pieces. And of course, we know that that actually does happen at the Armory Show to some degree, but remember all those Dada pieces where there was a riot, or pieces were destroyed, or pieces were stolen. We're seeing the same thing, the same sort of really harsh reaction to the Armory Show, because we're taking something that people understand, or they believe they understand, art, and we're saying, well, actually, you don't understand it because it's moved way ahead. And imagine being a regular American while this is happening. You're sitting there looking at your Winslow Homer, your Thomas Eakins, these very basic, very realist pieces. And then you're confronted with this and you go, well, that's ridiculous. It's like suddenly being told, hey, by the way, the last 50 years, you're 50 years behind everyone else. You have a lot of catching up to do. And so it's going to cause growing pains. It's going to cause people some definite discomfort. And here we see art at the Armory Show. And again, in the upper left, guess who has shown up? I've just broken the pen tool. There it is. Guess who's shown up? Here's Duchamp and his nude descending a staircase. And here we see a child looking at it. Papa, buy the puzzle. Saying that it's incomplete, that it's incomprehensible, that it needs to be put together differently. We see a person standing on their head. No, I don't see it yet. That old idea of, is the painting upside down or right side up? We're picking on titles again as we move to the upper right. 4th of July in Egypt, the Mexican Revolution has nothing, etc. Bust of a gloom. Portrait of a cube artist. So really sort of playing off of a lot of these different ideas. Again, picking on something that we don't understand. And yet, this is an important conversation, because the longer this conversation goes on, the more that these cartoons are put out there, and there are hundreds of them. We're not going to go through all of them, obviously, but the more that this conversation goes on, the more people think about it, the more people will slowly begin to accept it. Slowly, even with these cartoons, they sit there and go, well, okay, let's give Cubism a try. And so we eventually get to the point where people have talked about it so much that it becomes passé, and they start to accept. We have the New Art Fest, and I think we've touched on this one already. We have this one. This is a very interesting piece. There was a cubic man, and he walked a cubic mile, and he found a cubic sixpence upon the cubic stile. He had a cubic cat, which caught a cubic mouse, and they all lived together in a little cubic house, playing at the idea of cubism and what would a cubist life be. So sort of an interesting way of looking at things there. And then we have, this is sort of the classic criticism. Look at art in the past. It was primitive, but it makes sense that it's primitive because the people were primitive. We have art of the present, and this is a highlight. This is wonderful art. And actually, when you look at art of the present, it's American art of the present. That's sort of the somewhat conservative image that we tend to see. And then it brings in the Armory Show, the art of the future. This art that is just incomprehensible, that doesn't take a lot of time. And for some reason, people always get caught up in that idea that art must take incredible amounts of time. For example, the sculpture of the David, the Sistine Chapel ceiling, the Last Supper, or whatever other piece by a Ninja Turtle. And people get caught up in that idea of time. time equals quality, time equals art. But it doesn't. Because had Michelangelo had a way of creating art faster, he probably would have. If he could have removed that time element, he probably would have. And time doesn't make art. There's so many pieces, Impressionist pieces, for example, that people would happily accept as art, or paintings by Van Gogh, where they were actually created in a few hours. So time isn't really an issue. We're not talking about hundreds or thousands of hours oftentimes.